Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This week we are continuing along with our work on Marshall McLuhan. We were reading Understanding Media, or at least a little bit of it, skimming it, going through a lot of the ideas in there, but also some of the ideas of from the medium is the message or the medium is the message, which I've listed also on Blackboard for you to have a look at. And in there, you'll notice that it's quite different from Understanding Media. It's quite different from that text because there's more images and the words that are there, he plays with fonts, and some of the text is larger, some is smaller. They're almost like quotations. And in other words, they're a lot like probes. And so I thought today what I would do is I would review some of the concepts we talked about in the last lecture for this week. Go over them again, and I'm going to go over them spontaneously. I don't have any notes in front of me, so that hopefully will allow you to hear me discuss a lot of these concepts and ideas, but in a different way and using different words. And hopefully that'll kind of triangulate things so that you can get a more a deeper understanding of some of this stuff. And then I'd like to introduce a final new theoretical framework offered to us by Marshall McLuhan for examining the media at any stage of historical development, but more particularly contemporary, because that's where we are. Incidentally, it occurs to me as I'm speaking that one of the things that Marshall McLuhan cautioned us against was adopting what he called a rear view mirror approach to studying the media or engaging with technology. That is rear view mirror understanding. A rear view mirror understanding is, I mean, just imagine you're driving in your car and you look in the mirror. To look at the mirror through the mirror is to look at what's behind you, which isn't to say that the things that are coming behind you are not real and they don't really affect you. It's just, for him, it's a bit of a regressive view. On the one hand, he was Marshall McLuhan was very bothered by contemporary society and the way in which media frames our social bonds, giving our social bonds structure and forcing us to perceive the world in particular ways, but also to act and interact with each other in very particular ways. He didn't like that so much, but at the same time, he wasn't regressive in the sense that he didn't have any nostalgia for the way the media was before. He doesn't want to just say, oh, enough with electronic media, we should go back to what we had before. Nothing like that. He doesn't want to go back to the age of radio. That's a rear view mirror approach. So if you're practicing, for example, McLuhan would say, if you're practicing lectures in this sort of unidirectional way that we kind of are here, sort of, not entirely, but mostly, then, where it's, unidirectional, I already have the information, it's prepared in advance and I'm delivering it to you and you're a passive audience and this sort of thing, that's very radio-like. And he says that's regressive. We have to be aware of our contemporary media and the way that it structures our perceptions and our social bonds. And by being aware of it, we shouldn't try and react against it. It's more about becoming conscious of it, because the more conscious we are of it, the less it can determine us. But we don't just want to hastily react to it and say, no, I don't like this, and go back to the world where everything's supposedly more clear and so on. So he was against the rear view mirror approach. The other word I just used was probe. So maybe what I'll do is I'll kind of create a list of some of the major ideas that we had from the last class, and then I'll kind of go through them. So I just introduced a new one, rear view mirror. Now we have probe or probes or probing, figure ground, media as environment, this idea that everything is media, pretty much everything is media as extension, media as gravity, hot, and cold media, and something here at the end, we were talking about oral culture versus literate culture. Okay, so let me go through some of these, and some of them I'll elaborate upon, others I'll just give you a very concise version. Last lecture was much more verbose. Okay, probing. I mentioned it earlier. What is a probe? A probe, again, is an attempt to open up meaning rather than to close it down. So when I give you this list, for example, of concepts from McLuhan, if I gave you very clear definitions, which is what I'm trying to do, but with a little wiggle room of ambiguity, which is intentional, if I were to close down the meanings, then I would be producing a very high definition media. I would be producing a very low involvement form of media, low participation, because if I give you the answer, you're not involved. You just passively consume it, which is why radio is low involvement, right? So that's what a probe does. It does the opposite. It encourages high participation. It encourages high involvement. And so it's low definition. So if I use words that are not very precise, that give you a little anxiety because it seems like you're not getting clear definitions, that you don't have clear structure in a course perhaps, or something like that, that's probing. And that's a strategy that McLuhan says we should make use of in the electronic age, and that increasingly we're kind of forced to make use of. I'll give you another example of where a probe has been used since the birth of modernity, since the age of modern revolutions. In other words, since the age of Sigmund Freud and Nietzsche and Emma Goldman. And that's the domain of psychoanalysis, psychotherapy, if you like, which I know very well because I'm a practicing psychoanalyst and I have been for quite a few years. But perhaps some of you know a little bit about psychoanalysis. The stereotypes are not entirely true, but there's some truth to it. The idea is that you go to your analyst and your psychoanalyst says, tell me more about that. Maybe you say to your analyst, I feel stupid. Why do I feel stupid? And then the analyst says, stupid? ? That's probing. The analyst is not offering answers, but opening up a space for you to involve yourself in your own, let's say, treatment, right? Another strategy that psychoanalysts often deploy, which is a lot like probing, is to say things that could be interpreted all kinds of different ways. For example, if you say something in a clinical session and then the analyst goes, well, one person might interpret that as being rude. What did he mean by Another person might interpret that as, oh, there was something significant there. The analyst thought there was something significant there. I should engage with that a bit more. Another person might think, oh, the analyst is not very interested in what I have to say, isn't saying a lot. In other words, we can interpret an on the part of an analyst in any number of ways. Why? It's because it's a probe. And probing is a useful strategy, particularly in the electronic age. I'm going to give you just one more example of probing. I didn't give you a lot of examples last time, so why don't I give you a surplus of examples? During the elections, I think politicians are very aware of probes. They might not call them probes. Actually, Marshall McLuhan told the then Prime Minister of Canada, when Marshall McLuhan was around, to deploy more probes in his speeches. He said, be more ambiguous. You can search for some of these letters between McLuhan and the Prime Minister of the time. But politicians will use words like freedom, right? Freedom's a good one, or even democracy. I think feminism has become a word like this lately. It never used to be, where we use these words and we presume that the other person knows what we mean when we say them. We want freedom. Well, on the one hand, who would deny freedom? On the other hand, people who are hearing this word are each hearing it in their own way. Freedom means something different to a diverse array of people. It means completely different things. To maybe some people think freedom means freedom from government interference. Maybe some people think it means freedom to pursue your economic interests. Maybe some people believe it means freedom to not be coerced by capitalism. There's a really horrible joke. Let's see if I can remember it. It's not going to make you laugh. It's a horrible joke about how freedom can be used to support the worst of things and the best of things. It goes, I'm not going to tell the joke, but I'll tell you what it's about. It goes something like this, like a guy comes to let's say Canada, and he punches another person in the face, terrible. And then the police come and they go to arrest him, and the guy says, I thought this was a free country. I thought, freedom to punch other people, and maybe in Canada, we would presume it means freedom to not be punched by other people or something like that. Okay, so that's probing. Now let's move to, what is the next one? Figure and ground. Now this one, as is usual, when I first introduce things, it can sound very obscure and abstract and impossible to understand. But as we go through it, it becomes more and more simple if you have the courage to try and figure it out. So don't be afraid to involve yourself in trying to sort out some of these things that immediately, perhaps even instantly, feel to you to be so difficult to grasp that you don't even want to try. Because it's not delivered to you on a silver platter in the way that it would in the age of radio. But figure and ground is perhaps one of these for you, but ultimately it means something very simple. The figure is what you can focus on. Let's say it's a media object. It's the media object you can actually focus on. The ground is the hidden environment, the area that you're not focusing on. That's it. It's very simple. Figures always appear within an environment. So the role of media studies, or what Marshall McLuhan sometimes refers to, and today it's more and more referred to as this, media ecology. You see, the word ecology is a synonym for environment, the study of the study of, let's say, the environment, within which figures of media appear. Media objects do indeed appear within our environment, within the ecological system of media objects. So media, and I'm kind of linking these two ideas here together. Media, understood as studying it from the perspective of ground, which is precisely that which is outside of our perception, outside of our perspectives. That's also to mean media is our environment. So we don't understand media as simply the figure, and certainly not the content. So if you were writing this down right now, you'd say media is not the content, and media is not the figure necessarily, or it's not reducible to the figure. So the content of media, McLuhan says, is incidental. It's quite incidental. What really matters is how the media makes up our environment, the environment of our sociability, of our social interactions in space and time, right? So media is environment. So McLuhan says it doesn't matter what's in the newspaper. Whatever's written, whatever arguments, it doesn't matter. It can be the worst things. It can be the best things. It can be things you agree with, things you disagree with. If you're analyzing it at that level, McLuhan says you're missing the point. That's purely incidental. It has an incidental effect, okay? So we would contrast McLuhan's formal approach, where he's looking at forms of media that form our environment, that form our subjectivity, our consciousness, our perceptions, our social bonds, and so on. We distinguish that from, let's say, what some people call in America, what some people call a sort of propaganda model. You don't need to know this. I'm just giving it as an example in case any of you are familiar with it. The propaganda model was offered by the anarchist Noam Chomsky very popularly. I think we're going to look at it at another point in our course. But his basic point is that look at the newspapers and see what they're writing. So you're literally looking for the ideology, let's say, that's presented within the text of the newspaper. It's not quite that simple for Chomsky, but something like that. You don't want to read what's in the books. You want to know what the books do to us, right? And they do something. I know this very well because I used to do this. It's a ridiculous practice, but in my clinical practice, I would take all of my books and I would face them. Instead of having the spine out like that, I would face them like this so nobody could read the books. It made it hard for me to find the books I wanted to read when I was doing my research and stuff, but it subverted their identification, because the first thing that a person likes to do when they see a book is to say, oh, I like to read too, and they identify with you. Or, oh, you have that book, I've read that book, now let's debate about what's inside the book. We're not interested in what's inside the book. You're missing the point. What's really interesting is the way in which the book forms an identification for you. Okay, so we're interested then in not what's said on the radio, but rather what the radio does to us. And I gave you all kinds of examples of that last lecture, so I'm not going to go through it again, but the simplest example was the rotary telephone, which, what does it do to us? It forces, or the filing cabinet, it forces us to go to it, to be around it in order to interact in our social environments. We can't be away from it. It's quite different from the virtual filing cabinet, the cloud, or the cell phone, of course, where we're kind of unhinged from a central location in space and time. Okay, let's move on through our review, because I don't want today's class to be really long. Now we're looking at media as, everything is media. So this point was simply being made to demonstrate the breadth and the real potential of McLuhan's media ecological approach for studying, for using it to study sociology, to do sociology. It's not simply what you do in a media studies department, where it could be quite narrowly construed as studying just what you imagine media to be, quite simply film, magazines, newspaper, and so on. No, not at all. McLuhan's approach is a sociological approach. It allows us to study the way in which objects in our environment structure our social relationships in space and time. And it's absolutely an incredible sociology, one that we often don't recognize as being sociological. So what does it mean? It means everything is media. It doesn't matter what you talk about. One of the things I missed before is to say that clothing is media, for example. And this links us to our next point. Media as extension, because an example of media as extension is clothing. Clothing is an extension of the skin for McLuhan. You'll find it online. He uses this example in The Medium is the Message when he's talking about some different extensions. It's an extension of our skin. How? Well, it provides us more insulation from, let's say, the cold. So the more clothing we wear, the thicker our skin becomes and the warmer we can keep our bodies. It produces a boundary between the inside and the outside, the inside our body and outside our body. So wearing armor as a type of clothing serves a really nice function, so that you can't be stabbed. Your body cannot be stabbed. Now you have harder skin, but it's also tactile, like clothing, and we like to feel clothing, and so it extends our tactility. Like, I don't know if I'm sure you're aware of them, but in the winter, a lot of people wear these gloves that allow them to stay warm, but also touch their cell phone and do essential things on their cell phone. So everything, media is an extension, all media, which is everything, is an extension of innate human sensibilities. It extends our perceptions, our subjectivity, it extends it out into the world. The easiest example I gave, I think, is the pair of glasses, the contact lenses, the binoculars, or the telescope, which extends our vision. so that we can see further. Okay, next I'm going to talk about here is media as gravity. Oh, sorry, I just got this new computer, and although I can type now, I have all kinds of other issues. Okay, so media as gravity. This, oh my God, this I've already touched upon, but I'm going to touch upon it a little bit more. I opened this course with a discussion from physics for a particular reason, because I knew we were coming to this point, the point that we opened up approached last week, which is trying to understand how a notion of mass or weight in mass media, for example, quite often mass media today doesn't seem to have much mass to it, although there are masses involved in it. The way in which mass media curves our social relationships in space and time, right? And I gave the example earlier of the filing cabinet, which produces a certain type of orbit where we are pulled toward it. You know, our social relationships are curved, and we become more aware of time. You know how, I don't know if you've seen that movie. I don't know if it's Gravity or Interstellar. No, it's Interstellar, where they're going from planet to planet, and they're dealing with Einstein's theories of relativity. Very superficial version of it, but a good one nonetheless, I think, for cinematic history, where there's a guy off of one of the planets waiting, and he's waiting for, I don't know, 20 years or something, and the people on the planet are there for, like, I don't know, 17 minutes, because they experience time quite differently, and it's felt at the materiality of the body quite differently as well. So when you're pulled down to the filing cabinet, the office, from, let's say, 9 to 5, you feel that 9 to 5. I remember when I used to work a sort of 9 to 5 job, I used to look at the clock. I'm so aware of the time. It seems to move slow. Time moves slower the more weight there is to the media. In the age of more virtual forms of media, where our currency has gone virtual and the filing cabinet has gone mostly virtual, and so on, time seems to go really, really fast, and we don't seem to have enough time. It's like, oh my God, there's still so much I should have done, but it's already midnight, which is quite different than looking ahead and saying, why isn't time coming? It's quite a different experience of time, So media could be understood then in a sociological way as a sort of gravity. I admit that this is my extrapolation from McLuhan's work, but I don't think I'm doing that much injustice to what he's saying. I really believe this is what he's saying anyway. You can go and read it yourself and judge, fact check me or whatever. But he might not be using the word gravity or anything like that, but I think it's basically implicit in what he's talking about. Let's move on now. Where are we? We are at hot and cold media. This was the first real theoretical framework, whereas the others are conceptual innovations. I think hot and cold media is describing a real framework through which we can study media, and maybe some of you will plan to use this as the key to your analysis for your case studies. I don't know. It would be a good launching point for the project, to be honest, to use hot and cold media and to explore one or two forms of media or advertisements on forms of media through this hot and cold media framework. So I'm not going to give this, because this is a big topic. I'm not going to give the whole thing to you again. That's in the last lecture, but just really quickly, hot media, remember, hot media is high definition and low participation or involvement. I would only add to that hot media tends to involve fewer of our sense perceptions. So like radio, it's just your ears, really. There's not too many other senses involved. Cold media tends to be low definition, which means that the platform isn't offering a lot in terms of content. It's up to you to do that through your high participation or involvement. It's quite the opposite then of hot media, right? But here I would also add that it tends to involve two or more of our senses. Cold media tends to have more of our senses involved in the media. Hot media tends to have usually just one or fewer anyway. The hotter the media, the fewer senses are involved, like radio, just hearing, right? But let's say television, there's more senses. You have your eyes and your ears. Let's say Instagram. No, let's do TikTok. TikTok's a good one because you have your eyes, you're watching, you have your ears, you're listening. You're also using your fingers because you're scrolling through things and stuff, but you're also speaking back to it. Your voice, you're talking to it. There's many more senses involved, and we could ask ourselves why the sense of smell is not very much involved in a lot of this stuff. And it's a very fascinating question, but we can't get into it. Except to give you a quick anecdote. It's totally worthless, but maybe it'll just give you a nice break for a second. I remember when I was in grade 5, elementary school, they one day the intercom came on. We had an intercom system going, which is a piece of technology going to all the different rooms. And something like what today we call a cell phone, but with limited range, among other things. And we heard some banging like this, right? And then a person comes on and says, please accept my apologies. We're fixing the intercom system. We're installing a new sort of innovative system whereby we're going to make popcorn because now you can smell through the system. So if you smell anything, come down to the office and let us know. And then we could hear popcorn popping. And of course, some people thought they smelled something and they went down to report about it. We later we realized it was April Fool's Day and it totally got all of us. Of course, you can't do that. And there's very interesting reasons why you can't do that. So another example, if we're imagining that media is everything, then a lecture is a form of media, and that's hot media. It's high definition, it's low participation, low involvement. You're very passive, especially right now. And I'll get to why it is that in the electronic age, even though we have cooler media, you're still passive sometimes. We tend to retrieve aspects of older media as we advance, but we'll get to that later. Then the seminar is cooler. The seminar room is a cooler form of media because it's low definition. The professor tends not to involve, doesn't give you a lot of information. It's up to you to bring the information. So you're more involved. The price of admission is your participation, which is the same for most social media today. But low definition because the professor in a seminar tends to be a fairly easy job, or some people would claim it's an easy job. That's actually quite debatable, but it appears to be, at least. Okay, let's see what's next. Okay, and then finally, oral culture versus literate culture, or cultures of literacy. I want to remind you that literate culture does not simply mean what you imagine it to mean, simply that these are cultures that read, versus oral cultures are cultures that don't know how to read. It's defined formally and not in terms of its content, formally. And we've already discussed what that difference is. So that was a longer review than I intended to give, but I hope it's somewhat helpful because I know this stuff can be quite difficult. I just want to elaborate a bit more on this oral culture versus literate culture thing, and then I'll move into the new stuff for today. Oral culture, or oral communication, what happens with oral culture? I've already told you a little bit, but basically what's happening is people are listening to a person who's talking. So imagine a person talking at the center of a social group and there's people all around, like at a church, or an imam at a mosque, or whatever. Choose the religion, or even a professor in a classroom speaking, or something like that. oral culture, there's somebody speaking and there's a lot of people who are listening, and they're listening all at the same time. So this is key. It's simultaneous. The voice comes out of the mouth, and it hits everybody's ears at the same time, instantly. It's simultaneous and it's instant. So, for example, that there's remnants of this that remain in literate culture. I just gave the example of the classroom, for example. There's the example of right now, you're listening and I'm speaking. So there's remnants of oral culture that are preserved, even in literate and post-literate cultures. So we don't get rid of oral culture. It maybe just shifts into a slightly different register. I'll explain how that works in a bit. But, lots of this remains even in more explicit ways, like, the church bell. It rings, it's a sound, people hear it and they go to church, or at least in small communities. In the Middle East, of course, I remember in every corner of this was in Lebanon, this particular time, every corner you would hear the azan, which is the call to prayer, which is the human voice through a loudspeaker or not. Or, in Judaism, it's the shofar blowing through the horn, to keep it simple. So you're called by a sound. In Hinduism, it's bells. I remember that very clearly in India. You're called, and then you gather together and you listen all at the same time instantly. And the sounds are heard simultaneously, as if you're covered in a sphere. The sounds can come from everywhere. There can be more than one person talking. In India, some of you maybe are from there or know people there or whatever, or have visited there. There's a horn culture. The sounds of horns mean something. They talk about the horns. I mean, the pandemic was the first time that in a very long time, for most people, it was the first time in their lives they've ever heard the horns stop. Just for a short while, but they did stop for a short while. And there was quietness in Mumbai and so on. Delhi, all the major cities. So that was because of lockdown. But there's a horn system, and if I remember how it works, a gentle horn means like, please move. One horn means I'm going to go to the left of you. Two means I'm going to go to the right of you. It's but nobody defines it the way I just defined it. They just know it. It's like, There's an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm about this where, is it Curb? I think it's Curb, where Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David in the show are talking about the gentle horn, which means, oh, please move. It's like you're trying to add some personality to the horn. So imagine for a moment that you're in Brooklyn, New York. I was there not long ago, so I know that it's not like this anymore. But it was like this, and you see it in the movies. Imagine in Brooklyn, New York, you see a young boy on the corner of a street holding a newspaper in one hand, kind of open. Like, just imagine this is a newspaper, and then underneath the other arm, he's got a stack, and he's going like this, and he's yelling, what's the word? Extra, extra, read all about it. And he's showing you. Extra, extra, he's shouting. He's using his voice. It's orality to get your attention. But it's a newspaper, it's literate culture, right? Not oral. Well, today they don't shout extra, extra, of course. They embed the advertisements into games or videos, often discreetly. Sometimes you don't even know it's an advertisement. The entire video might be about making a Pepsi bottle explode, and you didn't realize that was an advertisement. Okay, well, I can feel myself going on a tangent, so I got to focus for a moment. Get back to the figure of our presentation. Oral culture for McLuhan is defined by simultaneity, simultaneous stuff, sounds, and instantaneous sounds. I need to plug in my laptop, forgive me. Okay, so the messages in oral culture are transmitted instantly and simultaneously to many people all at once. I thought about drawing this on the whiteboard so you can kind of imagine it visually, but I think I'll forego that because it seems to me to be quite simple. You just imagine sort of one person shouting and all these arrows going around to the audience. The audience hears it instantly at the same time as a mass, as a group of people all at once. The ears are the key, obviously. Sometimes I'm saying things that are quite obvious, but you still have to say them because even though it's obvious, you don't realize how obvious it is until you say it. And then it's like, oh, that's obvious, but why didn't you think of that? So the ears are the key instrument of an oral culture, as I mentioned last week, because we cannot easily turn them off. In fact, they're always receiving information. They're environmental. They're always receiving information. It's true to some extent for the other senses as well, but at least we can deceive ourselves. When I close my eyes, yes, my eyes are still functioning, but it's as if they're not. Yes, I don't have to touch things, but they're still working, but it's, you can't deceive yourself with the ears so much. It's refined in the sense that we have to learn how to focus in on what we hear and choose what to hear at the expense of other things. And it's a very delicate, very difficult, very primordial skill that we learn. And not everybody learns it. And I'm not even sure it's entirely a mark of learning, but, just to keep things simple. Some people have a real difficulty with this. Maybe you're one of them. I know I am at times. You have to wear earplugs or earphones, noise canceling earphones, in order to avoid the small talk of other people, or to cut out the noise of those around you. Some people, of course, and maybe you identify with this, when you hear the slightest little noise when you're trying to study, you can't anymore. You can't focus. I knew people in who had a very small home, and they had a noise canceling headphones for every person, and they got a lot of work done that way. It worked very well. Well, there's also the curious fact that these are very popular headphones, earplugs, and so on for some people who unfortunately suffer from a certain amount of mental distress today. People who come to see me in my clinic, a lot of autistic people use headphones as a sound blocking device so that they can focus. It's an interesting observation, and it would be, I think it would be incumbent upon us to critique cognitive presuppositions in cognitive psychology about what constitutes focus for cognitive psychology being a key ingredient in intelligence. I'm not satisfied with that explanation. Focusing does not mean you're more intelligent. It's a different type of intelligence, a different type of awareness of media. Ultimately, that would be McLuhan's answer. Okay, so that's enough about oral culture or oral communication. Let's talk about literate for a moment. In the internet age, literacy becomes, again, simultaneous, instantaneous. Now, what is literacy again? It's, when you think of literacy, it's the first thing you should think of is reading a book, which is what I mentioned last week, or last class, sorry. It wasn't last week, it was a couple days ago. It's sequential, it's not simultaneous, it's one at a time, one page at a time, one person in a lineup at a time. Sequential, linear, orderly. A, B, C, D, E. The alphabet is literate. You go one at a time, and it produces what many people consider to be an orderly behavior, but also perhaps a certain type of snobbery where you believe that this orderly behavior is somehow superior to an oral form of social bond, and it's certainly not. But the internet age, literacy becomes once again simultaneous. This is where things get complicated for McLuhan, because literacy becomes instantaneous and simultaneous, like oral culture, but it's with literacy. We still have text on the internet. Sometimes it's more like a sign or an image-based language with emoticons and snaps and Instagrams and all this other stuff. But it's not orality, but it has the features of orality within the literate age. This is why we often say post-literate. For example, you can post a tweet and instantly many people can read it, and simultaneously if they wish, but often it's not simultaneous. It's as if you're in a church speaking to a congregation, only it's much more pervasive than oral culture, because in oral culture, you have a small group that can hear your voice because your voice can only travel so far. In a post-literate culture of the contemporary period, our messages can reach many people, many more people, indeed everybody almost. So because we turn to text sending emails and so on, textual documents, they can be transmitted to other people as if they're being transmitted to their ear, but it's not, it's being transmitted to their eyes, sometimes to their ears too. So we have what McLuhan calls, I'm not going to open whiteboard, but if you're taking notes, this might be something to highlight. We have what McLuhan calls an ear for an eye. It's a very obscure formulation, but I hope you get it based on what I just said. You have an ear for an eye because it produces instantaneous, almost simultaneous. It's almost like an oral culture, but it's not oral. It's it tends to be much more visual. So we transform our culture from an ear, which is oral, to an eye, which is literate, to an ear for an eye, which is post-literate, putting it fairly simplistically. So what we have now is one message which is transmitted as the same message repetitively to a ton of people who are capable of receiving it they're capable of receiving it at the same time, even if they don't get to it right away. Like there's messages on my cell phone right now. I did receive it instantly at the speed of light, fiber optic. Yet I'll get to it when I want. See, it's not quite the same as oral culture because my ear is over here. I put my ear over here now and I exchange it for an eye. It hears for me. It's endlessly listening. This is why the internet and the television are actually acoustic media, according to McLuhan. They're not simply like newspapers, which is with your eyes, reading the newspaper, or like a book, because newspapers separate the reader and the audience members from the message from some degree of time. You're delivering newspapers, you'll read the newspaper whenever you like, but the text message shows up instantly. I'll get to it whenever I like. You know, the delivery boy has to go house by house, and there's some time between house 1 and house 20. But it's getting closer, you know, it's cooling things down a bit. The smartphone is like an ear then, because it's always on. I don't know what anxiety you get when your cell phone loses power when you go to sleep at night, but for me, it certainly gives me some anxiety sometimes, even though I know I'm being bombarded by demands on here that I wish I didn't get. So phones are an extension of the ear. They are extensions in the sense that they constantly monitor our environment for signals. We miss that when we just look at it as a figure. But there is a difference, nonetheless, between earlier oral cultures and post-literate internet age cultures. Some of the synchronicity is lost. We do lose some of the synchronicity. We had more when we were in oral culture. They have more synchronicity. So we don't always receive it instantly, but it's almost instantly. We say at the speed of light, but there's things like internet lag, like maybe while you're watching this, the internet's going a bit slower and it's taking you longer to download. But we're always trying to make it more synchronous, right? Which is why our universities, it occurs to me suddenly, why our universities are pushing during the pandemic for it synchronous as possible. Of course, we can't do it right now, but that's what the optimal situation would be. It certainly would be the optimal. So we try and make it more synchronic, more instant. That's why we have things like Instagram Live and Facebook Live and so on. Twitch. Okay, but what else? Well, have you noticed that we are moving more and more towards speaking to our technology, which is a bit like oral culture. We're speaking to our technology more and more, and we're having our technology speak to us. I was in the car today driving, and I was getting messages, and my car was reading the messages back to me, and I was pushing a button on my steering wheel, giving talking so that the message could be delivered and transformed into text and so on. So, I often use a microphone, the microphone button when I'm giving a text message. I don't know about you, but if you want a more obvious example of how we're moving more and more toward orality in our post-literate age, just think of Google Home, Alexa. Is it Alexa or Alexis? Alexa, yeah, and all those other ones. You speak to them, they speak to you, and often they don't even have a screen. So we're always trying to transform our technology back to what we had, even while we advance further. It's a key point. Which brings me to the new theoretical framework that I wanted to focus on today, by way of perhaps winding down from the major innovations of Marshall McLuhan, even though hopefully we'll still have that interview or whatever we'll do with Andrew McLuhan. I want to teach you about media tetrads. This is an invention by Marshall McLuhan. I didn't discuss it last week. It seems to me that we have a number of conceptual innovations. We have probes, medias, extension medias, everything, medias, gravity, and so on. And we have two now major theoretical frameworks, one of which is hot and cold media, and the second is media tetrads. And both media tetrads and hot and cold media can be used to analyze the media. You could use them in your case studies. Indeed, I encourage you, if you want to go that direction. I think it'd be wonderful for you to do one or both of them to explore an advertisement, or, come to think of it, you don't even have to do an advertisement. Just analyze something media that we hadn't fully analyzed in the course, something original. So I told you that McLuhan was interested fundamentally in the effects of media, EFFECTS, the effects of media on our sociability, our social relationships in space and time, right? And we explored some of the ways that media as environment shapes sociability, as gravity, as extension, and so on. But now there's another way that that we can sort of plug that all together in a nice analytical way through what McLuhan describes as a tetrad. Tetrad, the word tetrad means, it means a set of four. The number 4 is inherent to the word tetrad. So we're talking about 4 things, 4 elements, a set of 4 elements. So, it's interesting because, like a number of important thinkers I've noticed, a lot of really important thinkers in multiple fields, they create these sets of 4s to a certain type of algebra using 4 elements to understand the social environment. Talcott Parsons, for example, used this approach in sociology. Some of you familiar with him from other classes. He had a 4-box system to understand society. And each box represented a variable. How does society adapt to its environment? That's box 1. Box 2 was, how does society achieve goals? That's goal attainment. as a ingredient. The third one was integration. How does society integrate its members? And latency, pattern maintenance is the fourth one. How does it repeat itself and sustain itself? This was Talcott Parsons had an approach like that. I see it all over the place, though. In psychoanalysis, there's a wonderful thinker named Jacques Lacan, whose work is central to everything I do, whether you're aware of it or not. And he had a similar approach. He described discourse as what constitutes a social bond, and he created all these different types of social bonds that are possible, ways that we can relate in society, of which there were 4 elements and 4 different ways. So it's interesting. There's something to this. But, you know, Talcott Parsons and Jacques Lacan are not that important for our course. I just want you to know that this is curious. So we have for McLuhan a box of 4 elements. Let's see if I can find a way to draw it. Yes, okay, I found a way. So let's do a box here, a box. Sorry, I'm gonna screw things up a little bit when I'm doing this, I'm sure. It's my computer that I'm still getting used to. Okay. Now, can I copy? No. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes. Okay, so this is our tetrad, 4 boxes. I should label it at the top. Oh, sorry, this computer is really difficult. Okay, so each box, so the tetrad taken together with all 4 elements allows us to analyze the effects of media. I'm going to give it to you abstractly, and then I'll give you concrete examples, and hopefully the concrete examples will elucidate everything you thought was difficult in the abstract version of it. So let's give each box a name. Okay. So if we have some sort of a media object, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Oh my God, this laptop. Then we can explore it in all 4 ways. Feel free to take a screenshot of this if you need it. You can, on a MacBook, I think it's Command-Shift-4 or Command-Shift-3. On Windows, it would be print screen, or you can use the, what's it called, a snipping tool, I think. You can type that in your search bar at the bottom, and that'll allow you to take a screenshot. Or you can just draw it in your notes or whatever if you need it. So at the middle, we have a media object, and we try and analyze it according to these 4 parameters, which are basically questions. Each one of these: enhance, think about it with a question mark, enhance, obsolescence, reverse, retrieve. Okay. So each one is a question that we ask of the media object. Let's go through each one. I'm not going to write these definitions for each one. So listen very carefully and transform my words into text, something that you can read. So what does the media object enhance at the top left? In other words, how does it allow for an extension to occur? What is the extension? Enhance could be a synonym for extension, as we've been describing it in the last two classes. And to what extent? You know, like, how does it amplify a prior media object? Even if that prior media was something innate, like our ears or our eyes, how does it amplify it? You know, something I forgot to mention last week is that media objects are always also studied in relation to other media objects, and the media tetrad makes that very obvious. A media object is always studied in relation to another media object. It's unavoidable anyway if everything's media, right? But, you know, like, take the traditional form of media, like television. Well, a television is made up of radio as well, right? Because there's sound in television. What about social media? Well, it's got the newspaper because there's text. It's got video, so it's got television in there. And it's got radio because there's oral stuff going on. You see, so every media object includes within itself prior forms of media. So enhancing it is, how did we extend something? From a website that I found online, I thought they put it very clear, so I'm just going to kind of quote them. You're asking yourself, when you're talking about enhancements to a media object, how does it amplify something? How does it extend something? How does it speed up or intensify something? How does it increase or upgrade something, improve the quality or the value or the reach of something? That's what we're asking when we're asking about enhancement. Now, I know it's really abstract right now. I'm gonna give you an example soon. But, you know, just think back to the notion of extension and you'll already get a sense of what enhancement is all about, since they're basically synonyms. What is obsolescence? Which, you know, maybe the better word is what does it make obsolete? Obsolete might be a better word to put in there, perhaps. Well, what's obsolete is something that was foregrounded, that was focused, that was a figure, becomes ground, becomes part of the environment, part of something we ignore, something we're not paying attention to, something outside of our focus, something that's moved from the center now to the periphery. An important aspect of the media object becomes no longer important. So what has been made obsolete by that media object? I've taken the following list of words from a website to help orient you and you're thinking about this question of what becomes obsolete when you're planning your media tetrad. Obsolete doesn't mean dead. It's just no longer in charge. It's out of date. It's out of fashion. It's version 1.0 when now we're at version 2.0, for example. Like, think about iPhone, whatever number you're at, versus iPhone 2 or whatever. Was there an iPhone 2? I don't even remember. What was there in the iPhone 2 that's been made obsolete by the iPhone 7? Smaller screen, I don't know. We're going to give you concrete examples soon. Let's go to the next one, reverse. What does it reverse? The easiest way to understand this is the following. And what new problems or accidents or unintentional consequences have been produced as a result of the new media object? You know, there was a philosopher named Paul Virilio, who I really liked. I studied with them in Switzerland. He said something just genius one time. It's eccentric, just like everything else we study in this course. But you know, it's a wonderful example of what McLuhan meant, even though Paul Virilio didn't intend it to be a McLuhanian statement. He said, with the invention of the airplane, suddenly you have the plane crash. Now, hundreds of people or thousands, I don't know how many people can fit into some of these really big jets, they can all die very quickly and instantly. So the invention of the airplane as a media object reverses this. This is its function of reverse. It produces now the possibility of the plane crash. I've taken the following list of words from a website to help you with this on what reversal means when we're talking about a media object in our tetrad. When pushed, a medium will reverse its characteristics. For instance, the highway is meant to speed up traffic, to make travel easier. But when you have too many cars on the road at once, you get a traffic jam. It's the reversal of what Marshall McLuhan calls the overheated medium. It's like a tipping point where the very thing that was developed to make life better actually is what's making it worse. Like you got a car to go really far and to go really fast, but now it's the cars that in the traffic jam, I mean, that's actually slowing you down. And, you know, there's an episode of Seinfeld, for example, where there's a parade and all the cars can't get by. So it's quicker for Elaine Bennis, one of the characters in the show, to walk than it is to be in the car. That's reversal. Finally, what does the media object retrieve? In other words, what does it recover from a prior medium? What prior values that were lost or that were eroded are now receded from our focus are now in focus again? You know, there's something that we didn't focus on, and now we can focus on it again. We bring it back. It was put back into the environment, and now it's becoming part of the figure again. The new media object retrieves that aspect from the environment and it brings it to focus. It brings it into the foreground. I've taken the following example words from a website that might be more clear. We're asking about what it reclaims, what it brings back, what it revives. What are its roots? What old has become new? There's every medium retrieves some previous medium. Okay, so these are the 4 questions that we're asking when we're talking about a given media object. Whatever the media object is, we explore it through these 4 parameters. Now, you may have noticed something. I'm going to complexify it a little bit more before I make it clear. Over here on this side, have you noticed that we're always dealing with things? Oh, I lost my, okay. We're always dealing with things in the foreground that are in focus, the figure. What is enhanced in the figure of the media object? What is retrieved in the figure of the media object? In other words, it's very positive. It's very positive. We're looking at the positive features of the media object, if you like. Over here, on this side, we are looking at the ground or the environment. What has been made obsolete, it moves out of our attention. We don't care about it anymore. It's not, you know, we don't care about iPhone 2 anymore or whatever. I like those little iPod Nanos, to be honest. I'd love to have one of those again. But, you know, it's receded into the environment, into the background. The reverse, it does the same. What reverses is the accidental stuff, right? So this side's quite negative, whereas the other side's quite positive, if you like. Okay, that's enough complicated stuff, and I know some of you are really scratching your heads, but now let's take some examples, okay? And hopefully this will make things clearer. I'll give you a few quick examples, and then maybe I'll write some in here, and then we'll call it a day. What about if our media object is a car? Maybe I will write this. I have a feeling some of you are going to struggle up until this point, so it might be helpful. Let's say our media object is a car. Okay, let's look at our media tetrad and ask our 4 questions. What does the car enhance? Well, the car enhances our ability to travel faster and further without getting tired. It's an extension, right? Enhances extension. So we can write all this in there. It enhances the speed of travel. We can move faster without getting tired and so on. So that's what you might write in the enhance field if you were plotting this in your diagram. I'm not going to write it because it's going to be too much writing and it's going to slow things down too much. I want to move fast. Okay, what has been made obsolete? Okay, think of another media object that was hitherto dominant before the invention of the car. I don't know, to my mind, okay, I don't have an amazing history of media or inventions, technological inventions. So if I'm not exactly correct, I'm thinking the thing that used to make us move faster was probably a bicycle in the city, or it was a wagon or a horse on a saddle, something like that. That's been made obsolete by the car. So I put that in the top right column, right? It's been made obsolete because the car achieves that function better. The horse can still get tired. You have to feed the horse. The horse will poop, among other things, right? Or the bicycle. The car can go much faster. You still have to use your legs when you're riding a bicycle, so you can get tired, this sort of stuff. And I'm sure you can brainstorm even better than what I'm coming up with, right? You got to be creative with this. So don't be afraid to be creative when you're going through these. Okay, where are we? Reverse. What does a car do in terms of reversal? This is where things for you are probably very unclear. What does it mean to reverse? Well, I mentioned it earlier, the traffic jam. Never have jam in a car. It'd be ironic. The traffic jam. The car was meant to make you go faster, but it can actually slow you down in some cases when there's too much traffic. If you're on the what's that highway in Toronto, the 401, can actually slow you down and be faster to walk sometimes. It's very unusual. Maybe not in the big picture, but so there's that. You could also say the car accident is a new possibility. If you were running and you fell, you might scratch yourself or maybe even at most break a bone. But if you crash when you're driving, you could kill yourself, right? So it's quite, that's another reversal. So you can brainstorm all kinds of possible reversals. I'm just giving you a few to give you a sense of what's going on. Retrieval, the final one in our tetrad for our media object of a car. Well, what does it retrieve? It retrieves the old idea of maybe a wagon or maybe even a horseback riding. I mentioned it earlier with what it made obsolete. You can see that enhancing and reversing are very close to one another in their answers, and what's made obsolete and what's retrieved are also very close. Just one's a positive, one's a negative. So what we're retrieving is what was lost. Maybe the horse, because only one person could ride in a horse. In a car, you can ride with a bit more people. Cars have horsepower though. Okay, let's maybe do maybe one or two more examples, and then we'll stop. And I encourage you to practice this if you're having any difficult time with it, because through practicing it, you'll probably understand it much better. There are no real correct answers. I mean, there are correct answers, yes, but they're not precise correct. You're allowed to be creative in how you plug these things in. So what now? Let's see. Let's do the iCloud. Well, maybe not everybody's using the iCloud, so maybe you're not all familiar with it, but like a virtual cloud sort of database, like the iCloud, okay? What does it enhance? Okay, I'm just gonna think creatively, spontaneously. It enhances our ability to work with one another. Like, I'm actually doing this for another university right now. We're all working on documents that are on the cloud. It's much better than mailing these documents. We're able to work together on them, and it does it in a way where we can all work at different, whenever we like. We can get to it whenever we like, just like a text message, right? So it allows us to work together, to collaborate, but it also enhances storage capacity. We can hold many more documents than we could in a filing cabinet, for example. And it allows us to retrieve that information from multiple devices. Like I can access the same document on this laptop and at the same time on my cell phone and so on. So, you can brainstorm more and more and more about how it enhances things. But that's good enough to give you a sense of things. What has it made obsolete? What has it pushed back into the environment? Maybe the flash drive, the USB stick. We don't quite use those as much anymore. They seem to be more and more redundant. We still use them, just like some people still use CD-ROMs in their cars and so on, but not to the same extent. It's been rendered somewhat obsolete. We don't need that anymore because now you don't need to put it onto a device and then bring that device and attach it to another device because it's all already out there on the internet. It also makes the hard drive more obsolete, right? Like we can have smaller hard drives now, solid state drives that are faster but perhaps smaller, precisely because it's all stored online. So we don't need hard drives. So in turn, our computers can be made smaller and so on. Hard drives used to be really big. It also makes it so that you don't need your own software because the software is now even on the cloud. Like if you go to Google Docs, which is a cloud, the word processor is built into the website. So you don't need to have your own word processor installed locally on your computer. So it makes that sort of obsolete. You don't need Word installed on your computer anymore, for example. Okay, you can think of all kinds of other examples. Let's go to reversal. Well, what new issues does it bring? It brings new security issues, big time. All of a sudden, we're worried about people stealing our information. This isn't necessarily a problem if something's sitting in your pocket on a USB stick because the USB is not connected to the internet. Somebody would have to physically steal it. So it produces, what new problems does it produce? Well, there's one, hacking issues. A problem that many people are facing is when the internet goes out or when you don't have access to the internet, now you can't access your files, whereas you could do that when you didn't have internet before. So it produces this as a problem. That could be a reversal. What does it retrieve? Well, it revives the old idea of a library, which was a place where you could grab things as if in a file in a Dewey Decimal System or something like that. Okay, there's a lot more I could say there, but I'm feeling worn out, to be honest. I hope that gives you some direction. I'll try maybe just one more real quick, and hopefully that will be enough to give you a sense of how to do this. Let's try Zoom software, or if you like, online education, on the online video learning, let's say. What does it enhance? It enhances our ability to access the content. I mean, we can access it any time of the day or night, from home, from anywhere. Wonderful. So it extends the classroom in a sense. What does it make obsolete? I'm just going to kind of roll through this quickly, whatever I can think of. It makes textbooks. It makes textbooks more and more obsolete. You can access PDFs online. So it makes, even libraries to some extent more obsolete. More and more of the newer universities that I've been helping to build, they don't really care about building libraries anymore. It's fascinating. And more, especially in the United States, libraries are places of collaboration with whiteboards everywhere, and there's no books there anymore. But maybe to you that doesn't feel like much, but to somebody like me who's seen the library system, it's mind-blowing to see how this has changed. It makes in-class learning more and more obsolete because going in class involves you having to drive all this way, having to go at a certain time to make time for it, and so on. Okay, where are we? Reversal. Well, it causes problems for those of you who don't have access to computers. or a good computer, or the space in your homes for quiet study and so on, or you don't have access to the internet, it can cause problems, because what it does is it actually makes it difficult for you to schedule things for yourself. So the very thing it meant to cure, it creates a scheduling conflict. You know, I think that's the best answer we can give for reversal here. You know, the idea of making time to go to school was difficult, because what if you need to work? What if you're a parent, a parental figure, and you have to look after kids or something? It's hard to organize everything to go to the classroom. So you want alternatives. You want to be able to work from home. So, but in solving that problem, the ability to work from home, now more and more people are finding it difficult to schedule the time precisely that they get to schedule to do the work online, because of all the various things like looking after kids and stuff like that. So it creates the very problem it was supposed to solve. That's what reversal is all about. Create scheduling conflicts, work-life balance issues, and so on. The final one is retrieve. What does it retrieve? Well, it retrieves the old idea of the student-centered approach, where the individual has more control over the teaching, I guess, which was, you know, something that universities used to be at the very beginning in oral cultures, what they called the mystery schools, where they had the initiations and everything. The whole idea was that teachings were passed by ear and on a one-to-one basis. And in fact, you were forbidden to write anything down. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here. I hope you're all doing well, and I thank you for your attention. I know that some of this stuff can be very difficult, but try and work your way through it with your own concrete example, and I hope that that it becomes clearer through that practical sort of effort of trying it. All right, talk soon.